Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. So today we're continuing on just a few discussions for Tom Clancy's The Division, and my aim is to seek that these decisions that are being made with the game are made toward the direction that actually allows for some improvements. Now, I understand that many people that may be listening to these videos may or may not agree with, how these changes, or may have different ideas. And that's why the conversation is open. The comment section is where we kind of discuss. And I usually tend to address some of the things in the comment section. So one of the really interesting things is one of my subscribers, longtime subscribers, mentioned something that I mentioned in another video. And, I never necessarily thought about it because this is something we had always kind of talked about in a kind of an arbitrary sense. So he said, basically he pointed out something that in my last legendary video, I talked about how I jumped into a group and me and 3 other people were able to complete a legendary mission. We didn't have any mics. We just kind of typed out what we wanted in the game chat. And we basically were able to beat the legendary mission because every single one of us had a lot of experience, just kind of knew what to do. We didn't make any reckless decisions. And it was good. And I think what's, that even sparked further was a lot of people were talking, even in some cases replying, saying it seems that the legendary missions are now even more popular or attractive than the raids, which is really strange because, the raids were supposed to be that thing where when it was announced, the Division community seemed to, some people in the community, not everyone, seemed to be excited. But the Division game and the way it's treated its old and, hardcore community, it's been about the incursions. I think the need or the desire to kind of copy Destiny kind of imported raids into the game, and call it what it may be, the raids are just in a strange way incompatible with the way the game works. And the reason I say that incompatibility is because of the demographics and the requirements for the raid. So the demographics of the Division is largely casual. That's just the kind of conjecture that I have because of the age range. I would say it's a lot of working class people. And then if you look back and think about maybe perhaps even the requirements of 8 people, that's always kind of challenging to get. Whereas in the legendary missions, you can start approaching them because of the different scalings and because of the way it's been designed for 4 people. And so it's getting a lot more playtime. It's getting a lot more, I would say, interest. And so this brings me to the place where I have to say the development team needs to look into even doing much more legendary missions after they release the Foundry raid and probably resign the idea of raids for the game. And, I say this because it's not as if the development team is not good at creating mechanics. In fact, I would say the Division 2 and the Division 1 has some really interesting mechanics that are, embedded within, especially with endgame content, evidence being from the incursions from the Division 1. Now, everybody may not like all the incursions, Dragon's Nest being the one that we thought was more disappointing, but you can't ignore incursions like Clear Sky and Stolen Signal. These 2 faction incursions were 4-man missions that required a lot of coordination within the teams and had simple mechanics in some cases, or complex mechanics that required, basically the complexity was in the coordination on how you actually implemented it. That was basically it. So if you take something like the raid Operation Dark Hours, you have maybe 4 different bosses that have 4 different mechanics and you made them into 4 different incursions. Something of that sort will provide, in my opinion, 4 different replayable missions for players to be able to jump into and engage. And I think it will give the team a lot more content schedule over time. So, like I said, Buddy and Lucy, maybe you have some enemies before you actually approach Buddy and Lucy as the final boss. You progress through something like that. When you get to the end, it's 2 Warhounds that are being controlled by some enemy NPC, Buddy and Lucy. And that would have been a good incursion by itself, making the teams to work hard, maybe add another aspect of the mechanic on what to do with the boss that's controlling them, maybe jam him with a signal jammer, maybe blind him, kind of an interesting mechanic where enemy NPCs continue to spawn, just something like Clear Sky, if you understand what I mean, but you have to do specific tasks to reduce the spawn, clear out the mission, and then rinse and repeat. That's one of the really interesting things about it. If perhaps you had an incursion where at the end of the day, you had to fight somebody like maybe Boomer and even the 2 guys at the hangar, I can't, Dizzy and whatever their names are, maybe you combine them into one incursion and you get to fight them. I think missions like these usually appeal more to the community because entry level is actually easier. player. It's just 4 players, and you can basically communicate if somebody is new and kind of walk them through things, rather than trying to communicate and try to walk 3 or 4 people through a raid. That's very challenging. It's very hard to carry multiple people. I mean, we've seen it on many streams. In fact, the other day, one of our fellow content creators, he was doing a lot of raids. He was able to carry about 60 plus people through raids who have never done the raids before. But I think there was a point where he hit a roadblock because they had a lot of new people, and so it was really difficult to kind of get the experience necessary to carry all those people. And that's where it's challenging. You can work with one person. I at one point was taught the raid too. I'm not saying there's anything wrong, with being new to the system. I was taught the raid. I'd watch videos, but different teams also work differently as well when you get into that context. So this is basically where I argue from that, legendaries getting much more of a limelight probably need more complex mechanisms as well. So, it's interesting that, they've taken a different enemy AI pattern where they've increased the enemy AI, their intuition, their speed, their damage, and they've put it in a mission. But then I think now might be the time where the next legendary missions that will be coming up will be used kind of a tactical way to add an incursion style thing. Maybe bring one every maybe 2 months. This will probably continue to make people invest in those missions and, engage in them. And then maybe bring some more complex mechanics other than just, kind of a limp, or I would say mind numbing shooting of enemy NPCs that can basically start happening when you're playing these missions over and over again. Now, don't get me wrong, legendaries are very attention require, they require a lot of attention. Don't get me wrong. But after a while, we're probably going to get to the point where we just kind of get used to them. We understand the systems. So it'd be nice to bring some really cool stuff. As much as we talk about, Dragon's Nest from the Division 1, for those of you who are veterans, this is an incursion where, at the end, they're basically trying to stop like this huge rigged fire truck or something that instead of, water, it's now using fire because the cleaners own it. You go hit 2 buttons simultaneously. As much as that mechanic seemed really boring, it's ridiculous to think that now that would have probably been some really decent content, because there were bosses that you could farm. You could do the 4 horsemen or whatever their names were, and you take them out and maybe, continue the mission if you wanted to get to the end and destroy the big tank, or you restart the mission for more loot. These were things that they were not intentionally done from the Division 1, but because of the way the mechanics were, it seemed like players just enjoyed them at that point. It's kind of one of those cringy type things that you look at it and say, man, this was really cute and this really worked, And so when everything tried to be polished too fast with the Division 2, it lost a lot of its appeal. It felt like a very different game, and that's one of the things about a community or your customers. Customers are not necessarily too eager about changes. And so what I feel like should have been done was changes should have been done and met out, progressively. So let me give an example. When the Division 2 started out, because we went to Washington, D.C., I think skills should have been an experiment to see how that will work. The development team seemed to struggle a little bit with establishing what the skills should be and what the skills were, because for a long time we were like, we don't even know how skills work in this game because numbers weren't adding up. I think just the way they've been rolling out all these skills and skill variations with the manhunt targets and everything we did from New York, I think that should have been a part of the progression with the game. And I say this because that would have probably given more data. It would have probably given them more opportunities to design skills that players were probably demanding, or even better variations to skills that players wanted to be in the game. And they could have started with a base level of skills that were from the Division 1. So what skills were players really using from the Division 1, and how can we have them continue to play and enjoy the game to work for skill variations? So things like the support station would not have been changed to like a hive, where the variations of healing skills are all under different things. You have a healer drone, you have a healing seeker mine that only is tied to a specialization, you have a healer hive, you have a cam launcher heal, and everything is just decentralized. Whereas in the Division 1, all your healing skills and their mods will stay together. That provided a much more organized system. And if they had started maybe with a basic level of skills and kind of tied it into the lore and said, you know what, you're going to Washington, D.C., and all the technology that you have is only this. As you continue to go and, deal with the other enemy factions, you discover stolen shade tech. I think this would have really played well for the game. And, we would have seen a lot of, excitement and enjoyment down the road, and replayable content, and even continuity in the game, and balancing and all those other things would have probably, you know, kind of come into place, and they would not have spent all this time that they spent, because I think the 7 whole patches were spent, or 6 whole patches were spent on balancing. That is a lot of patches. I mean, it's crazy right now that the game had to be balanced over those many patches, all the way through patch, you know, 1.8 or something, or title update 7 or whatever it is, and that's the game that we got. So I think the development team needs to look more into their community's makeup and look into what, you know, this player base actually likes, and start to dial into those things, because if they do, they will really be able to create a successful product out of this game, and even run 1, or I dare say 2 more years out of the Division 2. I know many may say it's difficult to see 2 more years of the Division 2. I do not think so. I think with some innovation and putting what already worked from the Division 1 into this game, I think we can see another 2 years. It's not out of the question, honestly, but it will take a lot of time. It will take a lot of work. And I know I'm going to see in the comments, oh, they've given up on this game and all that stuff. That's what everybody was saying before Warlords of New York came out. So until we are certain that they have given up on the game, then we need to kind of still, you know, just say, okay, wherever the game lands, we'll see at that point. Me, in my case, I'm providing some optimistic insight, because I think it needs to be done for the future of, you know, massive, you know, products that they're going to be bringing out down the road. So that's basically my video. Thank you so much for your time and audience. I appreciate you guys a lot. Thanks for watching my videos and engaging in the discussions. I think many of the discussions that we've been doing here has probably affected the game one way or the other, and hopefully in a positive way. And I hope that we continue to have these discussions to influence the game to take a positive turn every time. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.